Ready. We're starting the hour. Good evening, folks. Thanks for coming in. Hope you're all doing well. So tonight you've got the three stooges. You've got Laura over there, hello. Sarah, and myself. He's going to say good evening.
Hi. I did. Hello.
Did you say hello?
I did.
All right. So tonight we are doing a quick recap about one of the UK's probably most famous monarchs. Anybody's been following the page will know that over the last 2 weeks or something, I've been doing several posts about Henry VIII and his 6 wives. So we thought, well, not everybody reads the posts, which is fair enough. Well, you know, I did myself. I don't read all the posts on different pages. So it was actually Sarah's idea to do this live, wasn't there?
It was.
I
meant from it itself, not for us to join them.
We should have said that after I've done it myself.
Great. Right, we'll go away then.
Are we?
Then it was just for you talking to yourself.
I usually talk to myself anyway. They put me off what I was saying. So today we're doing a quick recap about Henry VIII. Now, Henry was born in 1491 and he was one of 6 or 7 siblings, but only 3 other ones. Eh?
You sure about that?
Aye. You put me right up. He was one of 6 or 7 siblings, and only him himself and 3 others survived. His brother Arthur and 2 sisters, Margaret and Mary. And Arthur was older than Henry, which meant he was a direct heir to the throne. They were all the children of Henry VII. So Henry, with being the second born male, he wasn't so much as ignored, but he was kind of put to the side. Most of the attention was focused on Arthur because he was going to be the future king. Henry was still looked after. He was very well educated. His father still came and, you know, visited him. So he had a fairly normal kind of childhood, even though he was second in line to the throne. His brother Arthur married Catherine of Aragon when he was 14. And then shortly after he became king. Well, he was due to become king. I'll get that right. He married Catherine of Aragon when he was... I might get some stuff wrong because there's a lot to this, you know. Arthur married Catherine of Aragon. Catherine of Aragon was from a Spanish family who had huge political clout. So it was deemed a good deal, you know, if Arthur was to marry Catherine, basically. So he did. But unfortunately, Arthur passed away when he was 15, which left Catherine a widow and threw Henry into the limelight. He was, you know, he was now heir to the throne. So all the attention was now moved on Henry. So his father had to basically start from square one again and try and teach Henry how to be king and, you know, government matters, political matters, etc. So Henry was 11 when Arthur passed away, and when he turned 18, Henry VII passed away. Now I might get some of this wrong, and if I do, I do apologise. We can't be 100% accurate, but when he was 18, his father passed away, so Henry became king, and he decided that it would still be a good deal if he was to marry Catherine of Aragon. So he was officially crowned king on the 24th of June 1509, but he married Catherine of Aragon on the 11th of June, so about 12, 13 days before he was crowned king. Now Henry promised to be a fair king, a good king, you know, to let his country prosper. One of the first things he did, however, was 2 weeks after he was crowned king, he had 2 of his father's most hated councillors arrested for treason, and they were executed, Richard Empson and Edmund Dudley. Now, we think he did this for 2 reasons. One was to gain more political power with these two people out the way. And the second one was to show, even though Henry was promised to be a good king, he wanted to get across that he was not a man to be messed with. And so he swiftly done away with two of his father's councillors. Back in Tudor times, it was a major thing to have a male heir. You know, it was one of the things you had to have was a male heir. And so Catherine, she fell pregnant, but she had a daughter, Elizabeth, who turned out to be Elizabeth I, which we will be going into further down the line.
Yep.
So also Henry was very, very disappointed, shall we say, for want of a better word, because everybody expected it to be a boy and it turned out to be a girl. So that started Henry wondering. Catherine was reaching the age of 40. Was she beyond childbearing, childbearing age? So Henry's eyes started to wander. Now, with Henry being the king, it was widely accepted that he took several mistresses. One was Mary Boleyn, who was the daughter of Thomas Boleyn, a member of the council. Now, it's not that Thomas Boleyn was famous for kind of pimping out his daughters, but Henry grew tired of Mary and the affair ended. But she had a sister called Anne, who was at that time living in France. So Thomas Boleyn recalled her from France and brought her back over. His intention was that she would catch the eye of the king. Now, Henry's eye was already starting to wander. He had it in his mind that if he did want a son, it was going to have to happen with someone else other than Catherine. So Anne Boleyn was introduced to Henry's court as a lady in waiting to Queen Catherine. And she caught Henry's eye more or less right away. But he wanted to take her as a mistress. But Anne was quite a strong character. And she made it clear to the king, even though he wrote her countless letters, sent her countless gifts, which she returned every time. Anne made it clear that she would not enter his bed, basically, until she was queen, until he made her his wife. So this put Henry in a bit of a predicament because it was against the Roman Catholic rules to get a divorce. But Henry went after one anyway, and he charged Thomas Wolsey, Cardinal Wolsey, with the task of obtaining an annulment. Henry's grounds for annulment were basically that he had married his brother's widow, and in the eyes of God, this was seen as a sin. So this was his basis for the annulment. So Cardinal Wolsey, he was brought in. The Cardinal Wolsey, he was Henry's right-hand man. He was hated by the Privy Council. The Privy Council were the kind of elite of council. Henry's sort of selected few that did Henry's bidding for him. But Wolsey was considered to be the second most powerful man in the country. But he was hated by the Privy Council for two reasons. One was that he was not of noble birth. He was the son of a butcher.
Was he?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that.
So in the council's eyes, he wasn't worthy of holding such a position. The other reason was that Henry tended to listen to Wolsey more than he did his Privy Council. So obviously jealousy was creeping in. So this is why Wolsey was not very well liked at that time by the Privy Council. However, Wolsey carried on and tried to get an annulment, to the marriage between Catherine and Henry. But Rome basically says no. He tried for a period of 2 years, and he could see himself that he was starting to fall from the king's graces because of his failure to get the annulment. So in a bid to try and save his skin, he gifted Henry Hampton Court Palace, which was, if anybody's ever seen it or been to it, it's an amazing building. It's absolutely massive and it's beautiful. That was built for Cardinal Wolsey. So he gave that to Henry. Henry accepted, obviously, but it did very little for him to save his own skin, basically. So after 2 years of waiting, Henry decided to do something that had never been done before. He married Anne Boleyn in secret, and then he decided to take the unprecedented move of breaking away from the Church of Rome. Now, we think he'd done this for 3 reasons. One, basically to obtain his annulment. Secondly, Rome had quite a bit of power over what happened in England. And Henry wanted that power. He wanted the Church of Rome out of the picture because he wanted that political clout. And the third reason was that the monasteries that were owned by Rome in Britain, Henry knew the amount of wealth that was there and he wanted that for himself. So he took the move and he broke away from the Roman Catholic Church and formed the Church of England, where he declared himself the supreme head of the Church of England. And that's why we have Catholics and Protestants. He's getting to add.
No, I did fine.
So with Henry being the boss, basically now, the marriage was annulled. Catherine was sent away, and Anne Boleyn was now queen.
She was still looked after, but
Hmm?
he still looked after Catherine.
She was looked after to a certain extent, aye.
Well, she still had her ladies in waiting. She still had a certain amount of money every month.
Aye, but
She wasn't just cast aside to the people.
no, she wasn't just cast aside, but she was stripped of quite a few of her homes and all the rest of it. She was still kind of looked after. Still got a cold, by the way, and a blooming cough that's just no disappearing, so I do apologise for that. So where was I? Where was I?
Just said about the Catherine,
so-
the reasons.
He married Anne Boleyn, who was, as I said before, quite a strong-willed woman. She had strong political views, and she wasn't any kind of pushover. So Henry set about closing down the monasteries, basically ripping them apart and taking the wealth for the crown. And this started, this was part of the play in Wolsey's downfall. What was I going to say? I'm doing well tonight, and I had all this in my head. I had it all in my head, and it's just kind of disappearing very, very slowly.
Wolsey went out of favour as well, though, because he refused to. Did he not refuse to sign some kind of?
Aye, the oath. Aye, the oath.
thing?
Aye, I'm coming with that one.
Right, sorry.
So obviously the Catholic religion didn't disappear overnight. There's still thousands of very prominent Catholics in Britain and in the UK. And Henry, he wanted them to, he came up with the idea to sign an oath. And anybody who didn't sign the oath, it was seen as treason. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, Henry's king. He's the head of the Church of England. And basically, he can do whatever he wants. Nobody's going to question him. So, the abbeys were shut down. The monasteries were shut down. The Catholic religion was still there. It was still very, very strong. And Henry now had all this wealth. He took it all. So, as time went on, Anne fell pregnant, and again, I got that right. Catherine didn't have Elizabeth. Catherine had Mary.
Catherine had Mary.
I've got that right, folks. I've got the daughters mixed up. Catherine of Aragon had Mary Tudor.
Mm-hmm.
Aye, I'm doing well tonight. I'm doing really well tonight. Anne Boleyn gave birth to a girl, Elizabeth, who became Elizabeth I. Catherine of Aragon had Mary Tudor, who would be figure quite prominently in the years to come, and she will become known as Bloody Mary, but we will be covering that at a future time. So obviously, Henry's got another daughter. Now, he did have a son illegitimately, but because he was illegitimate, he could not be in line for the throne. He was still looked after. His name was Edward. Still looked after, but he died at a very, very young age of what they think was called the sweating sickness. But as I say, because he was illegitimate, he could not be king.
No, was he no king for like so many days?
No, that was Henry's. That was for Jane Seymour.
Right.
Henry, their son, out of wedlock with an affair that he had, but because his son,
Aye.
you know, his mum was the queen, he was illegitimate.
Too many sons and too many daughters.
And so he just could not be king. You put me off.
Sorry.
But there wasn't telly back in the days. So.
Well, no.
There was no telly back in the day. That's how he had 6 wives. And, so after Anne gave birth to a daughter, Henry started to think again. Maybe, you know, it's not going to happen for me now. Anne suffered 2 miscarriages as well. There is a story that her second miscarriage, the baby was deformed. And Henry saw this as a sign from God, as a punishment from God for breaking away from the church. Now, obviously, religion played a major, major part in life, as it still does in a lot of people's lives these days, but back then it was a major, major part. The Privy Council, they despised Anne because, again, the king was listening more to Anne than he was to them. So it was kind of like jealousy. And so they had to get rid of Anne.
Was there not also a rumour though that Anne fell pregnant to her brother and that's why the baby was deformed?
Well, aye, there's all different stories. So they had to get rid of Anne. And so charges were brought up against Anne of witchcraft, incest, that she had affairs with 4 or 5 different men. These men were all arrested, and only one confessed. What was his name? Smeaton. He confessed under torture to having an affair with the king. But the thing that
Having an affair with the king.
The king, is that what I said?
Aye.
Having an affair with the queen. No, the king. Maybe did or something with the king. Who knows? You know, living a little live back then. He confessed to having an affair with the queen.
You know, you scared.
I'll wait till you tell
Carry on, Rapper.
If only there was a restart button, Scott.
I know, if only it was a reset button. That'd be good, wouldn't it?
Right,
He's
continue.
done.
Yes, continue on.
Right. But what finally put the nail in Anne's coffin was a gentleman called Henry Norris. He'd been engaged to a Lady Sheldon, but he decided to break the engagement off. And one day he was in the presence of the Queen, and the Queen quizzed him about it. You know, why are you not married yet, etc. And Anne turned around and said to him, "You wait for dead men's shoes," which basically meant that he was waiting on the king to die so that he could maybe have Anne. Back then, even to dream or mention the death of the king was considered treason. So after that was said, it was heard by 7 people. That was basically the end of the line for Anne. There was no going back. So she was arrested. The others were tried separately from her, all found guilty, all sentenced to death. Anne was tried and found guilty as well. And she was also sentenced to death. But because she was royalty, executions used to take place in public, either Tower Hill or Tyburn. And it was kind of like a day out, thousands of people would come to witness the execution. And but because Anne was royalty, she was executed within the Tower, and because she'd been convicted of witchcraft as well. There was two possible sentences. One was burning and one was beheading, and it was down to the king which one, she would suffer. He decided beheading. So it's said that Anne requested that the swordsman of Calais be brought over to carry out the execution, which didn't happen. The swordsman did come over and the execution was carried out. But with the timeline, the time between Anne's trial and her execution, at the time it would take for the swordsman to travel from Calais to London, it's widely thought that he was actually summoned before Anne's trial. So she, her fate was already sealed before she even went to trial. Now, whether that's true or not, we don't know. But it has been noted throughout the years just about the timeline did not fit. So they think that Anne was already doomed, before.
Did it not keep getting put off as well?
It was put off twice. She was meant to die at 9 a.m. in the morning, and the constable of the Tower came and said she wouldn't die till lunchtime. He then came back and said she would be, put to death the following morning because the swordsman had been delayed. But while all this was going on, Henry already had his eye on wife number 3, Jane Seymour. And I think it was 2 days after Anne's execution, he married Jane Seymour.
That was a bit quick.
Yeah.
Well, Henry didn't hang about. He knew, he wanted a son, and he did have an eye for the ladies, basically.
Well, that's true. He had 5 wives in the space of 10 years, didn't he? So
What?
he had 5 wives in the space of 10 years.
Aye, that's true. Aye. So Jane Seymour became queen in 1536, not long after Anne was beheaded. And she gave, now it was a rather short marriage, she gave birth to a son, Edward. Obviously, Henry was overjoyed. He finally had the male heir that he'd been wanting for so many years. But Jane fell ill and passed away 2 weeks after giving birth to Edward.
No, was it not dual childbirth?
No,
I'm sure it was dual childbirth.
it was 2 weeks after
Okay.
that she passed away.
You're
She'd
the
been
expert.
ill since childbirth.
Okay. You're the expert.
You know?
You're the expert.
I'm not the expert, but I'm not the expert. Everything that I wrote in the post, I done to memory and stuff. I've wrote dates and that down here, but I'm certainly no an expert. No doubt I'm getting stuff right tonight, but Well, aye. So Jane passed away. Henry was heartbroken, but he was encouraged to remarry very quickly. So up popped wife number 4.
Was she really wife number 4 though?
Aye, they weren't married.
Aye. All right. Okay.
That's why it's 6 wives.
Aye, I know, but I didn't know if they actually got married or not.
No.
Because they pretty much annulled it.
So
Mhm.
you put me right up what I'm saying.
Sorry, I'll shut up.
This has got a point, to be fair.
I know, but they were actually married, and then it was annulled.
Yeah.
Why go through the bother? Why waste all that money?
It was all to do with politics and stuff and money, basically.
Yes, I know, she was a German princess.
So Henry had been informed of Anne of Cleves, and obviously back then they didn't have cameras or anything, so he sent his artist Holbein to do a portrait of her and bring her back. And he'd already been told by 2 of his advisors that she was a beautiful woman. Her brother, now I think his name was Edward of Cleves, but he was also known as Edward the Rich or something like that. So Henry was advised to marry her due to, obviously, the king had to have a wife, and because of the money it would bring to the English crown, basically. Anne was brought to court, and Henry was raging, to say the least, because she was nothing like, what was displayed in her portrait, and he called her a Flanders mare. But the deal had been done, so he had to go ahead with the marriage. So they did go ahead with the marriage, but it was annulled shortly afterwards.
6 months, I think they were married.
I don't know how long it was. Was it 6?
Mm-hmm.
No, they were married in 1540 and annulled in 1540. The grounds for the annulment, Henry says, because he'd never consummated the marriage. So that was wife number 4 gone. All during this time, Henry is getting older. His personality is changing. He suffered a jousting accident where he suffered a head injury because he forgot to put his visor down. And they think it's been said that after this injury, he was never the same man. You had to basically walk in eggshells every day. It's estimated that he executed roughly between 57 and 72,000 people. Yeah, and it did so you had to walk in eggshells. The slightest thing that upset the king, and you were off to the scaffold, and there was nothing you could do about it. You didn't have any defence, nothing. And so time started to change for Henry. He was no longer the young, fit, athletic 18-year-old that took the throne. He was now starting to get older. His weight was piling on. His health was starting to fail. But he had to find another wife. After his annulment to Anna Cleves,
Where again, he never just kicked her to the curb, but he was quite good to her.
that's what I was just going to say.
Okay, sorry. There we go, me.
After his annulment to Anne of Cleves, he still stayed very close to her. There are stories that they ended up in bed, eventually, and he would visit her quite often to play cards and whatnot, but they did remain close, and she was very well looked after. So during this time, Catherine Howard came to Hampton Court, and she caught Henry's eye. And Catherine Howard was only 16, 17. She was still fairly young. And Henry married her, basically. But because of Catherine's age, she was very naive, and she did have a bit of a past. A couple of years into the marriage, one of her ex-lovers came to court.
Who?
Thomas Brereton.
Who was Thomas Culpepper then?
I'll tell you in a minute who Culpepper was.
Okay.
Brereton had known Anne, known Cat. You're putting me right off, so yeah.
I'll go away then. Jesus.
Brereton had known Catherine when she was a young girl, and he started telling people that he worked with, and within the King's Court, that they had relations, shall we say, for time gone by. But he could not prove any of this. One of the King's groomsmen, Thomas Culpepper, he started to make advances towards Catherine, and for some reason, Catherine, she went for it, and so she began an affair behind the King's back. She was assisted in the affair by Lady Rochford, who was the widow of Thomas Boleyn, Anne's brother, who had been executed at the same time as Anne Boleyn had been executed.
I knew Culpepper was involved somewhere.
So started the affair with Culpepper. In the background, Henry, as I said, he's getting older, and he's paying less attention to business or state. One of his closest advisors, Thomas Cromwell, took over Wolsey's position, basically. but he was arrested for treason in 1533. I think it's 1533. Aye, 1533, and then executed
Why was Cromwell executed?
because he basically wasn't liked.
Right. Was that the wee Bible guy? The wee Catholic guy?
No, that was Thomas More.
Right. Too many people.
No.
Too many people.
So Thomas More, who had been a close friend of Henry's for most of his life, he took over the position of Henry's right-hand man. However, Thomas More was, what's the name of it? What's the name of it? It's a religion. No, he wasn't a Catholic, he was something else. He had never signed the oath. Now, this oath was a major thing to Henry. In fact, his own daughter, Mary Tudor, had refused to sign it, and she was threatened with execution if she didn't sign. A threat that was later withdrawn by Henry in public. But Thomas More was asked to sign the oath. He refused to do it because of his beliefs. He was arrested for treason, basically, and he spent quite a bit. You put me right.
He spent quite a time in the Tower.
Quite a bit of time in the Tower. His family begged him to sign it. After all, they said it's just a bit of paper. Just sign it. You still have your beliefs, but he was very, very strict in his beliefs and refused to sign it. So eventually, he was executed as well. So Henry's basically rattling through the executions. You know, as I said, anybody who disagreed with the king for any reason at all ended up on the scaffold. You something to add? Sarah's got some facts about Henry VIII that I didn't know about.
None that tie into this, but
Nothing?
No.
After you've written stuff down.
I'll tell at the end.
All right.
Maybe it's relevant to know.
All right, okay.
These are just random facts that people don't know.
Right. So the affair with Thomas Culpeper was brought to the attention of one of Henry's aides, who put it in a letter to the king that Catherine Howard, in fact, been, carrying on. Henry ordered an immediate investigation. Brereton and Culpeper were both arrested, as was Lady Rochford. Culpeper confessed to having the affair, and him and Brereton were sentenced to death. Lady Rochford, now, it's not confirmed or anything, but during Lady Rochford's imprisonment, it's thought that she actually went insane, and Henry put it to Parliament to pass a bill saying that insane people could be executed. Catherine Howard was arrested, and this is partly where the story of the haunted gallery comes from. After her arrest, she was confined to her chambers, but she managed to break free, and she ran along the gallery, the Great Gallery in Hampton Court Palace. Henry was at prayers in the chapel, and her aim was to reach the king to beg for her life. But she was caught by the guards before she could reach him, and she was dragged back to her quarters, basically. She was moved to the chapel of Monsieur Silon while her trial was prepared. She was tried and she was convicted of treason as well. One of the main things that enraged Henry was that her past had not been disclosed to him prior to the marriage. So this made him look like, a bit of an idiot, basically. So Culpeper and Brereton, they were executed first, and Lady Rochford and Catherine Howard were executed the following day, all by beheading. So that was wife number 5, done and dusted, basically. At that time, Catherine Parr came on the scene. Now, Catherine Parr came from a well-to-do family. She was very well educated. Excuse me. And she was quite strong in her political and religious views. Once they were married, obviously she was queen. Because of her views on religion and politics, there were members of the Privy Council that didn't like her. And Catherine herself knew that she'd overstepped the mark in some of her comments. And she realised the dangerous position that she'd put herself in. Plans were drawn up for her arrest. But Catherine, before she could be arrested, Catherine went to the king, her husband, and pleaded for mercy, basically apologising to him. Henry, by this time, was in his 50s. His health was totally gone. He was severely overweight, and Henry forgave her. So she escaped the scaffold. The plans for arrest were dropped. And then Henry died in 1547, and Catherine Parr was the only queen to outlive Henry. So came to an end the historic and brutal reign of one of Britain's most famous monarchs. And it's a subject that's always, I mean, there's been many kings and queens over the centuries, etc., but Henry VIII seems to be somebody that captures the public's interest, people's interest, and we've covered that a few times, haven't we?
Mm-hmm.
We've covered the Tudors and quite a few times, and it's a subject that we're fascinated with. We're certainly no experts, and tonight I'll probably get quite a bit wrong, date wise, but there is a lot to remember. But I think one is the biggest things that he'll be remembered for. One is 6 wives, and his break from the Catholic Church, which now gives us Catholics and Protestants. After Henry's death, his son Edward, the son of Jane Seymour, he became king. But we'll go into that as well.
Yep.
Later on. So, I mean, tonight was just a quick recap on the posts I'd done.
Mm-hmm.
And they're on the page for everybody to go back and read them. But we just wanted to do this wee short live. Sarah's got some facts.
I've got a question first up.
What?
See how he had 6 wives?
Yes.
I think he genuinely loved each wife, but in a different way. Because obviously each wife brought something different to the marriage. Do you know what I mean?
Well,
But
it was
I'm saying
married
that, like, love then, is like love and romance back then is completely different to what it is now. Because obviously you married for a heir, basically, to the throne, right? So I'm just thinking, like, did he genuinely love each wife, but in a different way? Because each wife brought something completely different to each marriage. So therefore they brought something completely different to Henry in his lives.
Aye,
Do
it's
you know what I
possible.
mean?
I think he did love each one except Anne of Cleves.
I was just going to say that, except Anna Cleves, because obviously she was ugly.
He was talked into marrying Anne of Cleves.
But then I don't know, because they did become quite close in the end.
Aye,
Close
after.
friends wise, so maybe he loved her differently as a friend.
Well, he could possibly have loved her after the annulment.
Because she was always invited to court, and she was in all the rest of the marriages going forward and stuff. So
I think by Anne of Cleves it was more pressure than anything else.
And if all 6 wives, right, obviously loved them each in a different way, who would you say you loved the most and why?
the first one,
You think?
Catherine Aragon.
I don't know. I say it's
Jane
all
Seymour.
wives are special. I would say it's a tie between Catherine of Aragon and Jane Seymour,
Yeah, I say Jane Seymour too.
because Jane Seymour gave him the one thing that
You need it.
he wanted.
Aye,
Well,
I
but
need it.
saying that, all the wives gave him something different, but obviously it was with Catherine Aragon for like 24 years, I think it was, right? Then there was obviously Anne. And then there was, who was next? Jane, who gave him a son.
Mhm.
Then there was Anna Cleves, right? Who he was just pals with. Then there was Catherine Howard, but she was just basically, I think she was a stepping stone, to be quite honest with you. And then you'd Kathleen Parr, who, she was the last wife, so she survived, but she was also the wife that had a detrimental effect on Henry's relationships. Because it was thanks to Kathleen Parr that Elizabeth and Mary were reintegrated back into the succession because of her.
Yeah.
Aye, she did have a big influence on Henry.
Maybe that was just because he was older and they just thought, I can't be arsed with this.
Maybe it was at that stage.
Aye.
You know, that he was there 50 and he was, you know, his health was gone basically.
So it was just a case of, aye, wife, right, shut up now.
That's my
Please.
husband. Okay, that's my husband.
Right, so do I know some facts?
So tell us
Next
some
year,
facts.
we do need to know some facts.
There was a hypochondriac. If there was even a word that somebody was diseased, he would put his cell in isolation for weeks at a time.
Don't forget, back then there was all these kind of diseases. I mean, Edward died through what they think is the sweating sickness that swept through England and wiped out thousands of people. So there was all these different kind of diseases. They didn't have the health care that they've got these days, obviously.
Aye, I know.
So he would have been paranoid.
He was very paranoid.
You know, even
True.
a sneeze.
The point that if buggered off when Anne, she had this sickness, it was a sweating sickness, he buggered off for like 2 months, had left her, and he wrote his own book with all wee things, like on how to, like a boil, for instance, he wrote a recipe to cure it, and there was like cuts he would write wee things to cure that.
Right.
And he ended up writing a book. I can't remember what it was called. There is an actual word for it. I can't remember. So he was the only English monarch to have ruled Belgium. He captured the city of, I'm probably saying this right, rang even, Tournai, in modern day Belgium in 1513 and ruled it for 6 years before he gave it to the French. Gave it back to the French. So there's some. He was very talented. He could speak Latin, French, ancient Greek, and Spanish.
He was well educated.
And he could read fluently in Latin, French, and Spanish. So there you go.
He was very well educated. That
He
was
was.
due to his childhood.
He obviously jousted. He played tennis quite a lot, and he could play the lute, which was a small guitar.
And this is what caused, because he had so many hobbies when he was younger, through his life as well. When he first became king, he kind of neglected his duties as king. He was more interested in going out hunting and playing tennis, or whatever, than he was running the country. And this gave Wolsey the chance to gain more power and more say, because he was the king's right-hand man. So in the absence of the king, what Wolsey said went, and Wolsey kind of took advantage of this. Wolsey was eventually charged with basically misappropriation of funds from the abbeys for the monasteries. It was brought to Henry's attention that Wolsey had been, skimming off the top, basically. And he was arrested. This was never proved. There's two different stories as to actually what happened to Wolsey. One is he died in captivity while he was still in prison. The other is that he died on his way to London to face trial. So was he guilty, or was he, did people just want rid of him?
Okay.
Because he, as I said earlier on, he was hated within the Privy Council. As far as they were concerned, he was the word there holding the title or position that he did, because he wasn't of noble birth, basically.
Right. Can we move on to the next fact?
Can I just point something out, by the way? I know it's slightly off topic, but if you actually go to Dean Park, you will actually see a loot from Tudor times.
Okay.
Sorry.
He decorated his palaces with over 2,000 tapestries. Now, to put that into perspective, King James I, right, Mary Queen of Scots' son, he had 200 tapestries, right? Henry VIII had 2,000 tapestries. They were all hand crafted back then. So,
And if you go in Hampton Court Palace, you see the tapestries are amazing that's hanging there. And it's all the original tapestries.
the next fact is about weird, right? He introduced a tax on beards.
Aye. You tell me right everyone, and I found that a bit on the weird side.
And it varied with the person's social status. So if you were a hobo, right, you would only pay like 1 or 2 pennies, basically. But if you were like a well-respected Privy Council member, you would have to pay more.
That's a weird one.
We
So
don't have that.
I'd be fine anyway.
You'd be fine. It was introduced because Henry realised there was a guy who done it, there was a king who done it first. I think it was in like, I can't remember the country, Italy or something like that, right? Don't think it was Italy, but we'll say it was Italy, right? And he done it. So Henry thought he could piggyback on this as a way to make money because he realised that 90% of the guys working in his court had beards. And he actually made quite a pretty profit from it. So there's a weird fact for you. He made boiling a legal form of capital punishment.
How kind of him.
I know.
That was a punishment for poisoning.
That must have been a big soup pot. That's all I'm saying. Because of the fact that he could speak so many languages and he was so well educated, he could write music, poetry, and he could also read sheet music and play. He could read it, look at the sheet once, and then play the song straight away.
Right.
So he had something like an eidetic memory.
There's only so many people can actually do that. Look at sheet music once and
Or look at something once and just,
yeah. Because of his love for music, he'd over 60 musicians on his payroll. Because he liked to have parties and stuff. He was very tall. He was 6'2".
If you read back to when he took over the throne, they describe him as very tall, slim, athletic, build, handsome, he was described as beautiful in some cases as well.
Well, he was 6'2", right? Which in this day and age, that is still quite tall, but it's not like, oh my god. But back then, men in the Tudor time were on average 5'5".
Scott, stand up.
I'm 5'6". I'm 5'6",
So he was considered to be unusually tall. And the last fact, his last words were reported to be monks. Monks.
that was his last words.
Reportedly, yes.
So was he seeing monks
Who knows?
just before he passed away? I know
Who knows?
when people are just on their last leg before they pass, some say they can see family members, angels, all different kind of, their mum, dads, whoever. They can see all different kind of people. So was he actually seeing monks?
Well, I thought that was quite fitting considering they kicked the Catholic Church to the curb and whatnot. But reportedly that was his last words, which I thought was quite odd. So I looked up a few sources, as I do with all my information. But That's what his last words were meant to be reported as. Monks, monks, monks.
I know that after he died, he wasn't buried for some time.
It wasn't, I love your wife, I'm sorry, and then it was monks. So I thought that was quite unusual. Especially the beard one, that kind of...
The beard tax,
That
aye,
perplexed
that's a strange one. But however, it was the Tudor times, wasn't it?
Luckily, it's not enforced now. But he never came up with it, like I said. It was some other wee guy. Just copied it. He just copied it as a way to make an extra side hustle, so to speak.
Right, so what?
Side hustle.
Right, okay. So that's it, folks. That's basically, as I said at the start, it's a quick recap of Henry VIII. I mean, we're trying to make it as accurate as possible. Some of the dates and that might be wrong. But, you know, with these things, you can never be 100% spot on. So apologies if any of our stuff was wrong. We always have tried to make our information as accurate as possible. We do make mistakes, but as does everybody else. So it was just a wee quick recap, and we're just going to wind it up there for tonight. We're back tomorrow night with Will and Kat Armstrong from Paranormal Exposures. Will is a fellow Pollock boy, fellow Glasgow boy, so it's been some time since they've been on, and I'm looking forward to having a catch up. So that's 9 o'clock tomorrow night. But we'll get quite a few guests lined up between now and Christmas time. Some old, but you know what I mean. Some of our regular ones, and
Returning
guests, and some new faces, and we've got some different kind of stuff coming in 2024. But that's for next year.
Yes.
That was me trying to do the exciting bit there. The coming in 2024. Does that sound?
Excited, Laura.
Oh,
Does that kind of catch you, make you wonder?
oh,
No.
Sitting up and gripping her seats, thinking, "Oh my
No.
God, what
Really
could be happening?"
And a week in Friday and a week in Saturday.
What is
The 11th.
that's?
what's happening?
Where is that? The 11th. We are off to Dunfermline to meet up with Phantom Seekers Paranormal, and we're going with. They two had forgotten.
I didn't. She did.
He'd
I'm so
forgotten.
sorry.
Didn't you forgot, didn't you?
I did.
She's useless. Well, weather dependent that is, because we might be hot with this storm.
Oh, there's maybe another storm on the way, folks, by the way.
No storm
Meant to be.
Kieran. That's why
We'll
I'm
see
going
what
now.
happens, you know.
It's storm.
You just read it.
I know. I should know this.
I know that.
Can't mind the name of it.
This one's meant to be. There was a wee bit of a storm a couple of nights ago. It wasn't anything major. It was a bit of rain and wind, you know, but they call it a storm. This one's meant to be 4 times as bad as the one the other night.
No, but Storm Kieran missed Scotland. This one's might be hitting us on.
Do you know, we'll see what happens. They always say that, you know, and you are going to get hammered with wind and rain and snow, and you're all buggered, you know. Stay in, don't go out, stay away from Tesco and Asda and go your, you know, and you wake up and the sun's shining.
Well, again, like we said, weather dependent.
You know, but okay, weather dependent. The weather's all right. The 11th we are off to Dunfermline Abbey with Phantom Seekers Paranormal and with our good friends from Spig. They'll be there as well. We've been up a couple of times and visited it. And it's a beautiful place. So we thought, we'll do a wee investigation there and see how we go on. We didn't get out on Halloween because we're loaded with the cold. Laura was feeling under the weather, and it was about -20 here. I don't know what it's like anywhere else, but it was absolutely freezing. So we decided that standing in a graveyard, you know, or at a farm as well, when you're loaded with the cold and freezing temperatures, isn't a good idea.
No.
But we have rearranged it,
Yes.
and the owners of the farm will be there as well. So it is going to go ahead, but just
Weather dependent.
weather dependent. I think we should just put that at the top of the page. Weather dependent.
Well, Scotland in the winter.
Aye, I know the weather can kind of let you down a wee bit, but it's a joy of what we do, isn't it? It's a joy of what we do.
Right.
But regardless of the weather, we've got some really good shows lined up for you between now and Christmas time.
Unless the weather makes
It's
the
better
broadband.
dependent.
The weather's going to do if we're indoors.
It does if the broadband gets knocked off. That happened last week.
I had broadband get knocked off because of the weather, but it was thankful it was back on. I think it was the
See,
next
so
day.
it's very much weather dependent.
I was back on the next day. Just put me right off. I'm saying, swear to God, telling you.
This is why me and Scott don't feel lives now together.
This is why I should just do it myself.
You
I
should.
agree.
I think that'll be a new thing. What do you think? I think you should do
Totally
it myself.
agree, boss.
Yeah, same. Totally agree.
It's totally gone. Totally gone.
Okay, then. On that note, we shall wrap it up.
On that note, we shall wrap it up there, folks, and we shall see you, hopefully see you, weather dependent. 9 o'clock tomorrow night. We will see 9 o'clock tomorrow night with Cat and Will. So thanks for watching, and apologies if I've got anything wrong or we've made a total balls up here. You know, we do our best. So enjoy the rest of your evening, folks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.